welcome to this session on culture. Will culture help or hindrance? And the main answer to that is, well, it depends what you're doing as to whether your culture will help or hinder you. So we're going to be talking about culture. What does it mean? What does it look like? Why do we care? And then what can one do about it if you actually want to shift something in the culture? So that's what this is about. Let me introduce myself first of all for those of you who don't know me. So my name is Elva Ainsworth and I was taught to ring when I was 12. I've been ringing on and off since then, now teaching my two boys, which is proving to be an absolute delight actually, so I'm loving that. What else can I say? Oh, have you got a chair?
No, I don't want a chair.
You don't want a chair?
I just left some stuff.
Aha. That's good. That's a relief.
I couldn't possibly manage 2 hours.
Brilliant. That's a testimony, isn't it? So why am I here talking about culture? Well, I had 10 years or so out of ringing. I mean, I was always connected to ringing because with the father rings peals all the time, and a sister and a husband and I was connected, but I wasn't actually going ringing myself and being with ringers. Then I came back after this spell with having 2 boys and singing a lot, and I was shocked to find what the culture was, which was quite interesting. So I'll share a little bit about that, but why am I in a position to talk to you about culture? Well, I talk about culture all the time in my work. I'm an independent business psychologist, I own my own business, I manage the culture in my own business, I am responsible for the culture in my business, but I'm not in control of it, much to my chagrin, I have to say. I was off sick for a year and a half, and when I came back after building my business for 10 years and being very proud of the culture that I built, I found it had gone in some other direction. It was heartbreaking for me, I can tell you, because so basically it's fragile and it can't be easily controlled. So we're dealing with something that's really quite tricky to deal with, this culture thing. So what on earth is it? But I do deal with many executives and senior leaders about the cultures they are building and nurturing and how they're doing that and how their style is impacting it. And I work with lots of different organisations with completely different organisational cultures. So I dip in and out. So, one day I'm in a private equity company in the city and there's a certain way of being and you're fast and that and you're very polite and you shake hands and it's like that. And the next day I'm working in the London College of Fashion and I feel like the worst dressed person in the world in that place. And, it's all about the design and the look and nothing works and everyone's friendly but no one does anything very fast. And then the next day I'm in Japan working with Japanese and they're like this and no one's saying anything they mean because they're just all very polite. So, there's a huge different range of behaving and being, and I love just observing that and seeing how people do stuff. So what we're obviously engaged here today is looking at how ringers do stuff, right? So what is it and how does it work? Hang on, I need to work out how to do this for the start. It was working earlier. Oh no. Can you help? Right, well someone's trying to work that out. Who has been ringing for more than 3 years? Hands up. Has anybody not putting a hand up? One person? Right. I reckon you're the only person who can really talk about this. The rest of you, you've got no clue. Seriously. No clue. Why do I say that? Because if you're in a culture, you don't really know what the norms are because they're just so there. They're just so automatically there. That's how you do things. This is how we greet each other. This is what's right. This is what's wrong. It's obvious, right? So obvious you're not conscious of it. When you're fresh into something, who's gone to a new hobby, gone to start a new hobby in the last few years? Hands up. You get a flavour, don't you? As soon as you come into something, how it's going to go. And it's like, oh, what do they do? Oh, they shake hands. Oh, you know, and you have to work it out. Well, so I recommend, by the way, if you're wanting to shift the culture in your area of ringing, one of the things you could do is just go to another hobby, just as an experiment, and see what it's like, get the experience of it, because you don't know what it's like to be an outsider in ringing when you are inside. And I reckon after 3 years you're institutionalised, okay? I've got no proof about that, I just think that's how it is. We're institutionalised. Now there's microcultures in ringing, so it's not like ringing is the same everywhere, not at all. But there are things in common that pervades across ringing. And that's what I'm talking about. And then there's microcultures that bump up against other bits of the culture of ringing. So there's sort of dominant microcultures or not dominant, that want to be dominant microcultures. And here we are at ART, and actually this is slightly different. We've got name tags for a start. What's that about? Don't do that in ringing, do we, normally? No. That's the sort of thing I'm talking about. And I like it. I mean, I'm not against name badges, but it would be really weird in some ringing.
Normally, in all courses and events, it's only in routine ringing where you know everybody it's not.
Yeah, but,
Exactly.
but in front, when you start for appeal, you pull off and the person who's invited
I don't even
starts
know who
introducing
they are.
you and you don't know who they are. You're lucky if you're
I know.
introduced before you start, let
I
them
know.
before you go to the club.
I know. And this strange thing of, do you even introduce yourself? It's like, hardly any other meeting of people do you not really introduce yourselves. It's really, ringing is really quite strange.
I've changed that now, so
Have you?
I couldn't stand it. It's just so rude.
It's so rude. There you go. So he's coming from a different angle there. Very interesting.
That's because I started ringing when I was 43,
Yeah.
not 13.
You were institutionalised at that point. At that point. So yes, so this is the sort of thing I'm talking about. So as we talk through this, think about what of your domain and the people and the groups you are engaged with, what do you like about culture, what happens and what do you not like. So what I'm going to do, just briefly talk about what culture is. I've mentioned the word but I haven't really explained what I'm talking about. Let's just see if we can understand the culture of ringing a little bit. And I know we'll have debate, we had a lot of debate earlier. So, and there's some conundrums in ringing that we're facing. You know, we are faced with ringing in church towers most of the time, right? And that has a certain impact on us. We are ringing without being seen, and the facelessness of ringing has an impact on how we behave and how we connect with our community and how much effort we have to go to even know who those people in the church are we should be talking to, as Mark was saying. So there's certain things we face that are just part of what ringing brings us that we have to deal with. So given all of that, then how do we want to change it? Should we decide we want to change it? I'll talk about that. Now, how should I do this, Mr. Technical Man? Sam. You see, I know his name because his name's on this thing. That's good, isn't it? Space. Okay, good. Culture, thank you. So, here's a definition of culture. The way of life. It's the way that we engage with each other. It's the way, it's quite amorphous, really. Especially the general customs, ideas, beliefs, social behaviour of a particular group. And this is absolutely key to the culture, to aspect of culture. It's group specific. Now, ringing is a particular group issue, by the way, because of the numbers. I think there's something interesting that happens in a tower where you've got, 6, 8, 10, 20, maybe 25, where there's freedom to move the culture with leadership. And there's also freedom to have very destructive influences, as some of you might think of a few personalities that might have been interfering with what you wanted going on. So there's quite fragile small group dynamics at play at the tower. Then there's the broader community that is ringers, and we're quite interesting size in that we do sort of expect to be welcomed in other towers. There's a certain mass of ringing, isn't there, that pervades over decades, that has me, be meeting people here today that I first met when I was 18. I mean, it's shocking. Shocking to me to think of that. But that's what we get to expect. And that has really quite a powerful impact on what's possible with ringing. You know, it's one of the wonderful things about it, but it's also one of the hindrance to moving forward. But we're talking about a particular group. By the way, the key thing about the group is, as soon as you've got a group, what have you got? Outsiders. And you've got in-group and you've got outsiders. Now, how much of an in-group person you feel versus an outsider might be up to you. You know, just because you're a ringer doesn't mean you feel like you're in-group. Who feels like they are perhaps not completely in-group with ringing? Hands up. Yeah, so there's some who relate to that, right? That's okay. Now it's interesting, but who can really shift the culture of a group? The whole group. The insiders are the ones that can really shift it. If you're part insider, part outsider, you've got quite a job on your hands. It's a different thing going on. It's more like, you're like a bit of grit. And if you're an outsider completely, you really are. So you're an interferer, right? You're not really necessarily in there to shift from within. You're something else. You're going to be forcing it. Now that may be what we end up. Sorry?
What about if you're a strong supporter and you consider yourself as an outsider, but actually you're a strong supporter?
Yeah, your influence won't be that high in the cultural levels, but unless you've got something that will structurally impact things, like a heap of money, or you know, you own the churches, or you know, things like that. So there's parties and access to power. Let me put it that way. There's access to power that can pervade that. But if you haven't got those access to power, what you have is your own personal leadership. So I'm talking to you all, and I speak to you all as leaders, wanting things to be better in the future. You know, you're wanting to create a better future in your own town, your region. Is that fair?
I think even as insiders, what you can achieve is very limited because of the inertia and all the others.
Yeah.
Culture is very hard to change, even if you are one of the most powerful people in it, because you're surrounded by a load of other powerful people.
It's a numbers issue. It's really a serious. You have a serious number issue. If you're the lone voice, for instance, absolutely, or you're in a minority. So then, but there's things you can do.
It depends on the aspect.
Like fire all the rest of them.
Sorry. You need one person in there. It depends on the aspect of the culture.
Exactly.
Some things you only need one person within the group who does that, and it happens with enough.
Exactly. You can. So we'll get to that. How the things you can do. So where does culture come from? It's worth understanding what are we dealing with here. Now those words at the top, let me read them out to you. Physical structures and symbols. Give me some examples of physical structures and symbols of ringing. Tower, yes.
Towers.
Towers, yes.
Caves.
Caves.
Well, we live in
up in the
caves.
sky.
We hide from our audience.
There we are. Symbols.
Association badges.
Association badges, exactly.
Blue
yes.
lines.
Blue lines. Yeah, there's a bunch of them. There's appeal boards, stuff like that. Collection boxes. That's a symbol of bell ringing.
No, we don't put anything in collection boxes because it's all going to be free.
Oh, exactly. Exactly. There's no till, is there, in the tower? Right? There's no little automatic credit card reader in the tower.
Credit card reader.
Yeah. Perhaps there is in Worcester, isn't there?
yeah.
Yeah, there we are. So that's perhaps the answer. Bring in the credit card bill thingy. Rituals and ceremonies.
Oh yes.
We've got a lot of them, haven't we, really? In some places.
Biggest teas.
Yes, Guinness teas are amazing. Absolutely amazing. And they've really maintained exactly the same over the last 40 years, it seems to me. Extraordinary. And going to, a college's dinner, there's masses of bits of ritual that probably if you've been every year, you don't really see most of it. There's rituals with going to the pub, or not. That's an interesting one, because that one's shifted, hasn't it? In some places, less pub going, automatic pub going, and I think that's quite interesting and had quite a negative impact on some ringing communities. I really do think that. Stories and legends. So the things we talk about. What do we talk about? The stories Mark told earlier. They are speaking of something where there's underlying values, attitudes, and beliefs, and they show the culture, what is important to us. how we get on. How are the York Minster Ringers feeling? This is important stuff for us to hear about. How do I know? Because it's being talked about. So there it is. And there's stories and myths, and what happens there will be, what the result will be very important to us. It might, who knows, it might change things. So they go down in, generations, these stories. The group language is a key one too. And this is something you can play with perhaps easier than the others, I don't know. Might be easier to just decorate your belfry rather than change the language, I don't know. But what people talk about, how people talk about things, that is a part of the culture. How you have do you complain about people? Do you talk about people behind their backs? Or not? Is that okay or not? Do you allow people to be late? Do you talk about when people don't do things? Do you talk about the fact that they're not ringing right? Now, when we moved to Amersham 3 years ago now, and no one was allowed to say anyone was striking ever. And it drove me bonkers. I couldn't bear it because it was not good ringing going on and no one was saying anything. It was not allowed. The reason why it wasn't allowed was the leader, the master, wouldn't allow it. She literally would shut you up as soon as you said anything. This is the sort of thing I'm talking about. It's what you say, how you say it. This is cultural.
I think it's the biggest elephant in the room as far as I'm concerned.
In what way?
Not being prepared to talk about the quality of striking and how to achieve it.
Yes, and I think so, and certainly in the case of Amersham, and it could be this applies elsewhere, is there was something about the politeness and niceness of us ringers, and the fact that we are generally polite to each other. We might not shake hands or kiss or anything, no, but we are, we don't say rude things to our faces, do we? That's not what we do. So therefore there's something that sits uncomfortably with giving feedback in some people's minds. So we're reflecting something in the British culture here. We're not isolated, are we? We are part of the British culture.
It's all a deference thing as well, isn't it?
Deference thing, definitely.
How long people have been ringing.
Yes.
And their age, and then it's perceived that they shouldn't be criticised because they've been ringing a long time and they're older.
And people,
even if they're rubbish.
yes.
Name dropping.
Name dropping, yes.
That is massive, isn't it?
Yes. Yes, there's all sorts of things at play here. And obviously, these things actually can be changed quite quickly if you spot it and you start saying stuff. And you face the fact that people aren't allowed to say things. Now, we talk about striking all the time. Everybody has someone giving feedback to the other person about their striking.
I think there's still a tremendous entrenchment in the law of striking and ringing, around the country. There's this odd thing in ringing that there is striking and there is making mistakes. And you can fall across the tower to your heart's content, put people right and dodge here and there.
But not for their striking.
But if you start talking about striking, it's a complete, as you say, a no-no. In my mind, if you're not striking correctly, you're making a mistake.
Yes.
You're pressing the wrong valve on the trumpet,
Now
for example.
yes, quite. Now the key thing to see here is the way things are right now, and this is one aspect, and I know there's a mixture in going on in this respect, but it's a real issue. The way it is a simple reflection of the values and beliefs right now. It's perfect as it is. That's the main thing about culture. It's perfect as it is. Otherwise it wouldn't be like that. It wouldn't be like that if it didn't fit perfectly with the current beliefs and values of those people, or the inheritance of habits. There's also something called habits that people get into. But the habits have come from the values and beliefs, and there hasn't been something sufficiently tricky to shift it. So there's something about habits, but the key thing to do is not to make it wrong, but actually look at, I don't like this anymore, actually, it's more appropriate to be doing this, what can we do about it? These are very important points to us, and I think just like me with my business, I found when I came back from being ill that there wasn't real respect for the senior clients. There was this no, they're not good, they're good. And it was starting to really impact the work that we were doing. Subtle, but it was. And it was tricky to turn around. So it's powerfully destructive if it's out of line with your objectives. Now the objectives of the people I left in charge of my business their objective was to survive without me. My objectives were something different, right? And they wanted to prove me wrong that they could do it without me, do you know what I mean? So you can see how that might have emerged. So I had to come back in and go, no, actually, we respect our most senior clients and this is how we deal with them. And by the way, that goes for you too, respecting me, you're out of here. But there is something about that. So there's something, by the way, about, and this is one of the main tools that you've got, outsiders, insiders. If you don't like the behaviour going on, what can you do? You can exclude people. But we don't normally do that, do we? As ringers, some do, more easily than others. But that is the access. You get to, if you're the leader and you're owning the culture, you're very clear what the boundaries are. This is what's appropriate, this is what's not. If you don't go along with it, you're not in my group. And I think, I mean, that fits with what we were saying. Moira was it Moira saying? No, not Moira. Can't remember her name. Anyway, never mind. What it was saying about saying no, it's like we need to be clear on those boundaries. I mean, the whole safeguarding thing obviously is a very crucial angle of that, but there's much more subtle ones. We just let things go very easily. We can say no. We can say we don't want you ringing here. I know we're short of ringers, but we still don't want you ringing here.
I think you're grossly oversimplifying. But firstly, in the statement that because we don't change it, we must think it's perfect. I think there's inertia. There's the fact that even if lots of people think the striking is awful, the fact we put it up for it so long makes it difficult to stand up now. And the other thing, I'll exclude you from my group. In most towers, in some towers, ones I've been involved with, there is not a leader. There is a collection of people of comparable seniority, no one of whom actually owns the situation.
That's right.
And you can have maybe a majority of them thinking we ought to do something about the striking, but collectively they can't move.
It's tricky, isn't it?
So I think this. It's a lot worse than your pain.
Yes, and I know that. I understand that. I understand this is very tricky, and I understand that taking that type of line is actually countercultural in itself. Actually, that's what you're actually
But it
saying
causes
there.
the biggest single divisions in ringing, which is about elite ringers and non-elite ringers.
Yes.
And that's all about just not being prepared to talk about what is striking, what is quality delivery. And that I agree there's inertia, I agree there's issues, but I think the biggest single thing is what you said before, Elva, the lack of a common language to actually describe how you can improve striking and how you can get better.
Yeah.
But it's also worth remembering that striking is one level up from the core value that being better is better. And that there is no, that's not actually a right or wrong value, that's an orientated value. So when you said earlier about taking up a new hobby in the last few years, I went along and started a world music tradition, a non-Western musical tradition. Right. And I was just really baffled that when I did something, I played a piece and then I would say, how can I do that better? What's the next step? And my tutor would say, oh, well, it's not really about it's not really about better. You might like to do it like that. And that he wasn't saying it was perfect. Yes. But for a lot of musical traditions, the idea of right and wrong is just anathema. Play Irish folk music and it won't be about right or wrong. So that's not to say there's no skill involved.
Quite.
But
I get it.
There's something more subtle.
I get it. Now, I'm glad you're bringing this stuff up, because you will all have your own values and beliefs, right? And you will hold them very dear because they're who you are and you've been brought up your way and they work for you. You know how important striking is to you, Stephanie, and improvement is key for you. But we're all slightly different. The key thing with these is you will always think yours are right and everyone else's is wrong. If they're different, right? Everyone else's is wrong. Now in Japan, they thought I was rude. they right? Are they wrong? They're completely different perspectives, different value set, different expectation, the whole thing. We all tend to hold on to our view is right, everyone else is wrong, when there are differences. So, but it doesn't mean you can't change something that isn't what you want it to be, but it helps, and I think this is probably the key thing that really helps you change your culture, is to understand that it's right for those people right now. You might come in with a different view, and it's your job to sell that, and persuade them, or put some grit in, and there's lots of things you can do, which I will get to if I move on, which I probably should. So, this is a tricky thing to deal with, really tricky, because we're talking deep-seated things. Space, that's what I need to do. Cultures differ very quickly. They can differ in terms of warmth at the top, emotionalness, in these countries we're talking about. So you've got, your Brazilians up there at the top, Spanish. You've got reactive and amiable and, courteous and polite, bottom right. You've got linear active, very cool, factual, decisive. Where are we? UK is right down in the bottom left if you can't see the detail. I've got printed copies if you want, by the way. But the UK's down there, and the USA is close by. Germany's right on that corner, right? But there must be something very closely connected between ringing and the British culture. Otherwise, it wouldn't be us that's doing it so much, There's something that fits. There's something right and wrong about how you ring, and we don't have to speak to each other too much. But we can be social, and we can have a team, and it fits, right? It's cool.
We're talking about British people, not a couple of Americans that meet each other on a train and say, "Howdy, my name's Jasper P. So-and-so, and I do this, blah, blah, blah."
They do that, yeah.
Considering you've got America down there.
Yeah, no, it is down there.
That's
There's
a sort of oddity, isn't it?
Yeah, well, they're not the same as us, but they're not far from us. They're not far. Although when I was there, it was like I was a complete alien. I couldn't deal with them at all. I was like, what? But that shows you the subtleties of cultural differences. So where people, this is values. So this is a model of values, and I just wanted to show you this because to show that people are at different places, depending on all sorts of circumstances and their development and maturity. And their value set so the values feed where they are. So survival's right at the bottom. If you're dealing with financial stability, or whether you're going to die or survive and basically live, you're going to be dealing with things in a certain way. You'll be dealing with control. You'll be dealing with corruption. You'll be dealing with all those. You want to get all that right. And we've got a bit of that going on right now. Then you can start to deal with relationships. Then you can get the relationships working right. And you can deal with, customer satisfaction. And there's things going right. And then what also shows up is manipulation and blame. So we've got quite a bit of that going on too. So we're dealing both those levels, I think. Best practice is at level 3. Now that's, I think, what ART is sort of standing for. But can you see it standing up at level 3 when actually quite a lot of the ringers aren't really there? Well, what's best practice for? I need some more ringers. Slightly apart, but it's trying to bring them up, as it were. So that's quite interesting. Transformation happens at a higher level, and if you're dealing with relationship issues, it's hard to transform. Hard to lead transformation and deal with personal growth. You can't focus on growth when you're not surviving. It's one of those sort of automatic things. And then in terms of community, it's no surprise that, Mark, you're dealing with very high-level stakeholder engagement now. You've put in how many years of working this up?
It's 14 years.
14 years probably to get from level 1, huh?
Long journey.
It's a long journey. And there's appropriate actions at each stage. So it's not appropriate to go and talk to your bishop necessarily if you've got one village church ringer. It's just a bit of an obvious thing, really. But at the same time, we're talking about providing service. So that's right at the top. So serving humanity and the planet is right at the top. We're not really quite engaging. We'll see what we can do, right? We'll see what we can do. Now, what is the pervading culture in ringing? Do you like that graphic, by the way? My sister popped that in. I don't know why she did that, but it's just nice, huh? If anybody wants it, I can send it to them. So, how do ringers show up? Well, I mean, you know, depending on which bit and which viewpoint you've got, you may disagree with me or not, right? But, by the way, most of this my sister did as well. So, dirty, messy belfries, or some are more messy than others, right? Drinking beer, respectful, mentally agile, committed, loyal. I have to say, timekeeping for some groups of ringers is spectacular, and turning up. Spectacular.
Can we have them?
Others not, yeah. So, you know, the efficiency with some is absolutely remarkable. It can be, but there's a lot of focus on getting processes right. But of course there would be, because ringing is all about getting it right. That's sort of in essence what it is, about getting that striking right and getting those. There's a right and a wrong way to ring. There aren't many pastimes where it's quite so clear. We might debate how clear we are about right and wrong, or whether we even can judge it or compare. But actually, we're all about getting it right. It's quite extraordinary how focused that is. It's not about winning, is it? Primarily. That gets a bit complicated, the winning thing.
It's 2 days a year. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. It's more about getting it right. More right and wrong than most music stuff is. You turn up every Sunday. Traditional. But it's a bit different. It's, you know, what else have we got in there? Unfashionable.
And loose tops.
Loose tops. There is a uniform. You know that, don't you? Don't you think? Yeah? Yeah. See, those who are into the fashion will know that there's a fashion. Am I wearing ringers' clothes? No. You know that. And I wouldn't be able to ring in this either. Do you know? It's obvious. Yes. It's one of those sad things that actually the tops you have to wear to be comfortable to ring are just look horrendous on me. I can't tell you. It's bad. Loose. You need loose t-shirts, don't you? So, what happens is that these things fit together beautifully, right? All these things, the stories, myths, symbols, power structures, organisational structures, the districts, the ringing schools, the tower structures, the central council structure, fit beautifully with the control systems and the power, and the rituals and routines. Now, some of that's under debate and discussion and is being there's a bit of grit in there, but actually they're there because it sort of fits right now, and it's just good to it's good to remember that. That's why it's so hard as an individual to make changes that go across the whole piece. Much easier it's hard enough just changing things in your own town, isn't it? So to change things across the piece is tough. But that's what you're dealing with. All those things fit together over time. And we've got a lot of time that we're dealing with too. So, what some of the conundrums in ringing? Well, we're dependent on the church, but independent of the church. But can we be? That's one of the debates. Old-fashioned culture, literally getting older. I don't know. Social activity for the non-social. You can debate those if you like. A lack of ownership of the leading body. Our leading body, we don't really think of it as ours, right? That's not ours. That doesn't lead us. No, that's not us. Male dominance. We had a big debate about male dominance. I'd really rather not, but anyway, I've put male dominance, but anti-macho. I'm not saying that there are. It's not about numbers. It's about energy and style. Current social leaders are disconnected from the power structure, traditional power structure. So, but I think all of that is absolutely reflective of the fact that, it's just my view, that in order to really get hooked on ringing, because if you've been ringing for more than 3 years, there's a level of being hooked, right? That you need to be comfortable with the fact you're doing something different. It's not the norm. It's not the norm for cool. Maybe you haven't really heard of it, like people haven't heard of it. There's that quirky side to it, right? And there's something slightly antagonistic to social norms there by engaging with ringing at all, which means these things live quite happily. Like we like that. That's like part of who we are. I don't know. So we should embrace that, you know, these strange things about us. It is part of what makes us special. Special. I really want to. However, when we engage with the outside world, it makes it very difficult, and I think this is where the effort really needs to be put, is about how to adapt ourselves to engage with the outside world differently. If that's important for our future, it's absolutely critical that we do. You know, maybe we need to put a whole bit of investment in social media training, do you know, probably. I mean, not social media, PR, media training. You know, because I think it's very hard when we're so in what we are to know how to speak to those outside. It's really hard. Even as a good salesperson, and I consider myself a good salesperson, I still have to really think, like, how can I say this to a non-ringer? And most ringers aren't particularly into sales, are they? No. So how do you even sell an idea anyway in the first place?
I talk a hell of a lot to non-ringers, and I always find a very positive reception. I don't find it always really, but it's usually fascination and interest. I mean, okay, I like to think I can put the story over well, but the story doesn't, you know, the story seems to be something that when they can understand it, they actually find it interesting and welcome.
You're very good at speaking.
Yeah, but it wouldn't work unless I've got a good message. I think the message is good, and I don't think it's really that cheeky.
Yeah. No, there's plenty of ways of speaking very well about it, definitely. So before we talk about the chamber story, I'll stand in front of it. Who wants the culture to be different from the way it is? Hands up.
Partially.
Some aspect. Okay, cool. Okay, well in that case, if you want it to be different, it might be your tower or your region, or it might be the whole thing. I personally would like the culture to be just modernised, really, like modernised, and be more externally focused, really. What there is to do, organisation anxiety down the left-hand side, is to unfreeze what you have. Now that's tricky, because you've got habits, this is the way we do things. We don't teach any, we don't shake hands to people coming in. I mean, there's masses of habits we have. You have to unfreeze them before you can realign them, and that causes anxiety. We don't like it, it's upsetting. Where are we going? Like, it's that sense of what's going on. We might lose what's precious. We can't change the central council because, what would happen? What would happen?
We are in the process.
Exactly.
Dream on, John.
Yeah. I'm not banking on it, but and then refreeze before you can refreeze. So the point is, there's probably more pain to go before it refreezes. Now, one of the things that might prompt that more quickly than it's been happening is the church and outside influence. Who knows? In a way, I'm sort of hopeful that the York issue might actually lead to a useful prompt in a constructive way. We'll see. I don't really know. But how long does it take to change a culture if you want to change a culture? Of 5,000 ringers, how long would you think it would change it if you wanted to change it?
A generation, I thought, but not locally.
Possibly a generation.
But ringing as a whole, it probably is a generation.
Yeah, this is a long-term project without huge will and huge grit. You think of an oyster, and you don't get a pearl without the little bit of grit, right? You need the grit.
Why then, Elva, are there so many people in ringing that one would talk to quietly and say, we ought to change this, and they will agree with one?
Yes, there's a lot of that.
And
yes.
then I am the sort of person that will do this, stand up in the annual general meeting of these wretched territorial associations. Say, I think we should do this, and everybody shouts you down, and none of the other people that agreed with you would put their hand up.
I got
Sit
silence.
there like this.
That's
And
called
there's a
social pressure.
Huge amount of this going
It's
on.
huge, yes. And so don't give up. It's the main message. But that's called cultural social pressure, and it's natural, and it'll stop people speaking up.
Yeah.
So it only can move if people speak up and do things differently, exclude people. It takes fresh guts and different behaviour, definitely from individuals, and then it will still lead to, it won't necessarily be fruitful straight away.
And that's why people tend, if they do want to make a difference, they don't tend to do it within the existing structures.
Yes,
Yeah.
it's much easier with a new structure.
Or set up their
And
own
new
little
people.
one and you can
Absolutely.
walk. Yes.
Much easier. Fresh. I mean, and that is one strategy, that you just kill something off and you go do something new. But it's not always quite so easy to see how to do that in ringing. So, if you want to, so this is the top tips in 2 minutes, right? Formulate a clear strategic vision that includes cultural change, but is not about cultural change. The key mistake to make is to think that's what you should be doing as your primary focus. No. Why you do want to change the culture, that's what you should focus on. So if we want to help turn around the church, right, okay, let's go. Do you know, okay, in order to do that, we're going to have this culture. So you need to have the strategic vision bigger than the culture change, that demands the culture change. So actually focusing on culture is the wrong way to focus. You need to focus on the bigger purpose and commitment that you have. And you all have it, so it's just really just focus on it and be committed. Display top leadership commitment. So even if you're not in charge, you might, there's a limit to what you can do. So maybe what there is to do is to get in charge. Okay, so it's what we did at Amersham, and it took literally a month with new leader and support. They weren't alone, and everyone was giving feedback to everyone. Literally within a month, it was happening. So when the top leader shifts like that with commitment, it's very, very effective. Model the culture change at highest levels. If the Central Council want the associations to change, the Central Council has to change, I say. Struggling with that at the minute. Modify the organisation to support the organisational change. While the structure is as it is, it's very, very hard. That's one of these key pieces. And I don't think people quite understand and appreciate how much that is true. It's bigger than culture is bigger than the people. It's bigger than you personally, and it's also bigger than the people. It's because it's in the physical world of our structure and our written rules of our associations. It's those are the things that are keeping things in place. So that's, and then select and socialise the newcomers so they don't pick up the old ways. Okay, be very explicit and conscious of that. So there's my tips, and I just thought I'd share. I've got a worksheet here for you to work through, should you wish to, which takes you through a journey of what's my culture now, how do I want it to be, what's the impact, blah blah blah, and then what do I do, what could I do about it. So I recommend you doing it. I thought, well, I'll try it on myself first and see if it works. It's always a good idea. So I did that, and I came up with this, and this is what I'm going to do. I only thought of it the day before yesterday. So no skateboarding. Now, John's looking very puzzled. We've got youngsters now in our town. There's nothing that talks to youngsters in our town whatsoever. And I thought, well, if I can just chalk no skateboarding, it just might make them chuckle. Because it's the sort of thing that youngsters see, right? And they sort of understand it. It might make them laugh. It might embarrass them, but anyway, it will be a little bit like, ooh. So that's what you can do. If you want to really tweak the culture, do something that's a little bit like, what is that? Anyway, if I do it in short, we can just rub it out, right? So come up with your no skateboarding idea. And that is the end of the talk. Thank you very much.